Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to boast that we're the UK's innovation agency. Since we've been prompted, I'll share our definition of innovation. And we contrast it with invention, which is turning money into ideas. Innovation is about turning ideas into money. So probably people know something about the Technology Strategy Board. We're now coming up on 6.5 years old. But actually, that's our current incarnation. The original Technology Strategy Board was set up in 2004 when the DTI set up an innovation unit. And because David Sainsbury sort of didn't trust government to manage innovation properly, he set up an advisory body of 12 businessmen and women to advise the innovation unit. And they were called the Technology Strategy Board. And they were an advisory board to government. So later, when they decided if it worked well within government, it would obviously work better outside government and spun it out. Quangos were trendy in 2006, for those of you who don't have the memory. Then actually, we kept the name because nobody could think of anything better. And now we have the bizarre situation that we have a governing board for the Technology Strategy Board, and nobody really knows what a board is. As I say, it was spun out. And one of the issues about spinning out from government is that you have to send it away from London. And so we were sent down to Swindon with the result that nearly all the civil servants that had been involved before decided they didn't want to add 3 hours commuting to their jobs. And somebody had the idea of recruiting a bunch of people from industry to be part of this new organisation. So my team, the innovation programs team, have an average of 14 years of business experience before they came to us. So that's really quite important. The budget in our first year was £150 million. We've become, over the years, a cross-party supported organisation. Our budget this year is £440 million, and it's going to be a lot more in 2015-16. We added about another 20-30% to our turnover, which is money that goes out to companies in the UK to support them being innovative. So why do you need an innovation agency run by a government? Well, one of the things we've done quite a lot of is brought together an analysis of all the problems facing companies, big and small. And this is them. People go, God, it's really concise and everything. I mean, there are various versions of this going back over 20, 30 years. These problems are not new. It's just that we thought that if we articulated them clearly and concisely, we could then have a debate about what we did to support them. So the first one everybody mentions all the time is money. It's difficult to get, you can't get enough, it's slow. And actually, that's sort of true, but not quite. We don't have as well developed a finance system as they do in some bits of America. If you don't believe that, try being an innovator in Idaho. But there are places where it's incredibly good. But we have a moderately good one. It's better than most places. It's just not really responsive enough. And part of the problem that we've uncovered as we talk to more and more people, both in companies and in the finance industry, is the problem isn't the money, is the conversation about why the risks associated with putting that money into science and technology isn't understood. It's not. There are a number of types of risks that companies face. There's the strict technological risk. Does it actually work? Can you actually make the thing you're talking about? And we have arguably the best research base in the world in UK universities, and if they can't answer the question, then you've got a problem. So, early stage companies, early stage ideas, if you're not working with the local universities or the best universities in the UK, none of whom are more than a couple of 100 miles away, by the way, then you're missing the point. The second challenge that quite often faces is the risk of commercial return. Can you actually make it for less than your potential customers are prepared to pay for it? Because if you can't, you're not in business. And one of the things is very few companies now make everything on their own. There are supply chains, value chains, whatever you would call them. You will buy components for people, you will assemble your part of the chain, and you will pass it on to someone else. So one of the things you can do is work with other bits of the supply chain And that's a really important thing that's working very well in some areas in the UK. People are talking up and down the supply chains and making sure they know not only what customers want or what suppliers are giving, but the timescales on which they're coming out. There is a whole bunch of risk around what governments do. You probably notice governments change every 5 years. They change ministers roughly halfway through that. And they have what they call policies, which are really strategic visions for the UK. They don't always have them consistently. One of the great things about the UK at the moment is we have now a consistent industrial strategy. I was at the conference yesterday talking about this. We do actually have cross-party support for the fact that industry is incredibly important. I'm sure Mark's going to talk about that a lot more later. But that's really important. Knowing where regulations are going, knowing where fiscal policy is going, knowing what government thinks about a particular sector gives people confidence, both in the UK and from outside the UK to come in. And finally, there's the financial risk. You know, if you have a small amount of money, should you put it into the building society or into investment in your own future? And that's where we can help in a number of ways. So the second problem is that, put simply, innovation is scary. If you're going to innovate, you're going to change something. And the more you change, the bigger the opportunity for profit, but the more risk associated with it. So one of the things we need to be working on is this partnerships, the up and down of the supply chain piece, and actually investing in all sections of the supply chain, not just one. Invest in the people who make the components, the subsystems, and in the OEMs to bring new products to market. The third point is that these are often long-term trends. Different industries have different timescales. I'm guessing, is there anybody in the audience who hasn't flown in a 747 recently? Okay. Don't get out much, do you? So the 747 was designed in the 1950s. You know, it's been upgraded and it's got flasher seats, but basically the design is 60 years old, and yet you think nothing of trusting to fly in it. How many of you have a 60-year-old mobile phone? How many of you have a 60-year-old car? So I do, you see on that one here. The point is that different industries have different cycle times and expect to renew. And if you're making a component to that, you need to understand where your industry is going. So we do a lot of publishing roadmaps and things like that. Innovation is a complicated thing. It isn't a linear process. You don't do one thing, then the other. You do one thing, it goes wrong, you circle back, you do it again, you meet someone and learn something. Over time, you make progress, but it's not a smooth thing. And so that means that people have, over different times, introduced different ways of helping innovators. And the thing that we hear from every company, and I used to be in them, is that having to deal with 20 people to get from A to B is really complicated. It would be nice if you had joined up support mechanisms by government. So you'll notice that on the sponsorship list, a number of organisations who work together to support innovators. And you know what? We all know one another. We all talk to one another. We all provide, we've met this company, you need to meet them sort of introduction. So we're doing that. Another thing is, over the years, government has decided to add things without remembering what it did the time before. So there's an accumulation of complexity. That's all being swept away now. I talked about government regulations. Government usually gets beaten up for regulations. Actually, there are some regulations that really drive innovation. The Code for Sustainable Homes has completely radically changed the new build construction industry. Tailpipe regulations have helped drive the automotive industry. The ACARI regulations for aerospace have actually changed that. Done properly, regulations can actually help drive innovation. Done badly, it can screw you over. And I was in the chemical industry, so we hate REACH. Regulation is important, but before that comes standards. People join groups with shared standards, so there are standards in there. And then fiscal policy. One of the biggest changes in the energy industry was the change from leaded to unleaded fuel, which was a very small fiscal change on the back of a lot of technological and logistics change. So lots of issues in there, that we now understand and we can go start addressing. So I won't spend too long on this slide, but this is what we've committed to do in our current strategy, and it's helping companies go faster from concept to commercialization. The quicker you get to the product, the more you're in the place where it's commerce and you don't need any help. That means we spend a lot of time understanding the business journey, which I've just talked about, and the problems. And what we're now designing is a coherent set of support mechanisms. We work very strongly with SMEs, and I'll give you some evidence that we've changed that. But don't forget that in many cases, an SME's route to market is through a big company. So we need to make sure that's there. And then, basically, we've decided we can't do everything. I've dreamed of saying this for years. £440 million is not a lot of money, and therefore we can't do everything. Therefore, we have to prioritize things. Behind everything we do, whether it's picking a big market, an area within that market, how we run a competition, or actually a proposal, there are 4 questions. 3 of them, if you can't answer, you're not in business. If you don't know who's buying your product or service now or in the future, if you don't know whether you can make it and you don't understand the timing required to deliver it to market, you're not in business or you won't be in business. The 4th question is the additionality question, which is, and why should we give you taxpayers money to do this? And I'm guessing you're all taxpayers, so you probably want us to look after your money. That means we have to ask that question. It's a difficult question, and it's all about the risk issue, because actually we should be funding the most risky but potentially valuable projects, because that's the way you get growth. This is the funding map. It's fairly well trailed. It shows where we put our money. The top 5 markets, energy, buildings, food, transport, and healthcare, are basically guaranteed to grow. They scale with the number of people and their affluence. They are things where government do have regulations, do buy, and do all sorts of things that control the market, so they're really important. We work with them. The 3 horizontal areas are translational competencies. Manufacturing is the way of turning materials and biology into physical assets. Digital services and space, which are sort of twinned, are how you turn information or data into useful information. And we work very strongly with the research councils on the purple boxes of the technologies. And we have a number of other mechanisms to do that. And then the big yellow box on the right-hand side is the catapults, beloved of Vince Cable. He kept mentioning them yesterday. These are physical places where you go to practice all the other things we talk about. They're really important. They're late stage. They focus the activity of the UK in that area. So I said we wanted to provide a joined-up support mechanism. So this is a way of describing it. It's not by far the most effective way, but I thought we'd try and do it. The horizontal axis is the time scale from concept to commercialization. The first thing you have to do is evaluate your idea to make sure it works. You test it both technologically and commercially and such. Then you go through the heavy-duty bit in the middle where you develop stuff. It's not the most exciting, and getting government to focus on that is sometimes difficult because there's nothing that's starting and nothing that's finishing, but it's where the back of the job is broken. And that's really important. And then finally you get to validation, where you take it out. Depending on your market, there will be some sort of demonstrator process that you put in there. Whether it's in biological systems, it's first stage in human trials, or it's in automotive, it's putting a car on the road. The vertical axis is the amount of help you need to get there. And it amuses people that I put money at the bottom of that. The very least we can do to help you is give you money through the grant system and all that. By far more important, we have discovered over the last 6.5 years, is putting you in touch with yourselves. And I don't mean personally in a sort of Californian way. I mean talk one company to another. So we can do networks. We can do connections and roadmaps to the industry. In some of our most successful areas, there are industry-derived and validated roadmaps that say this is where this industry is going over the next 10, 15 years. And finally, and particularly now with the Growth Accelerator, mentoring those companies. If we give you money and we actually help you get better at doing your job, you are more likely to succeed. So that's the rough outline. If I now start putting on our various products, At the bottom, we can give you a very small amount of money to go talk to people, innovation vouchers. After that comes the SMART Award. There are various flavors of SMART taking you through the development thing, but it's just money. So that's there. A few years ago, we started running feasibility studies. These are in our thematic areas where we can tell you what the challenge is in the area, and we can work with you to develop your new ideas. They're small amounts of money, short-term projects, developing ideas. Those turn into the product that we're probably best known for, which is the collaborative R&D work, which is, as I said, the development activities. And then over the last few years, you'll see more and more demonstrators, the low-carbon vehicle demonstrator, Retrofit for the Future, Dallas, all those sorts of things. What's fascinating for me is that over the last couple of years, in the biomedical catalyst, we've put those all together into a single integrated program of escalated. It's 3 stages, it starts with feasibility studies, go through development, and takes you to first stage in human trials. The catapult, as I said, is very close to market stuff. It's where you're looking at how you turn this into a real product and sell it for real money that is yours to do with what you want. We also have launch pads. These are cluster development tools, very heavy, not a lot of money, 100, 200,000 pounds, but a lot of focus on mentoring, pitching, understanding things, and so on. And then further down the road, we work with UKTI on things called missions, where we send 20 companies out to the place they probably most fear, be it Silicon Valley or Boston or Bangalore or China in manufacturing. We take you to the place where you have the most to learn and the most to benefit from linkages. We also have SBRI, where we work with government departments who tell us what they want to buy in the future, and we work with you to help develop them. It's not perfect. Getting government departments to think what products and services they want to buy in 5 years or so can be an uphill struggle. We've got better at it over the last 3 years. And then we have the KTNs, Knowledge Transfer Networks Connect, which is our computer dating agency for innovators. And that way, it works at all those levels. You can meet people with similar ideas, similar needs, and similar aspirations. One of the questions we get asked is, how do you know if you're investing wisely? And this rather strange graph is an attempt to try and understand that. The horizontal axis is the timeline of the metric you're using, so the future to the past. And the vertical axis is the size of agglomeration. We're looking for economic growth, which is this top left-hand corner. And so what we start with is in the top right-hand corner, the challenges facing this country. We derive those down to competition specifications. We talk to everybody in an industry and we say, what could you do if everything worked out well? And when they've got really excited about it, we say, so what's stopping you? And that's where we put the competitions. There's no point in helping them do what they know how to do. Let's help them do the difficult stuff. That then goes into the actual projects that we fund, where we monitor, we use standard project management techniques and make sure they've delivered on what they do. And we've increasingly looked at impact assessment. You'll find numbers floating around. We did a review a couple of years ago which said that for every £1 we'd invested, the companies who we'd invested in told us they were going to make £6.73 back to the Exchequer. If you unpack that, what it says is the programs that were run by the DTI, that number is 3. The programs we started running are 25. So this challenge-led approach, the convening, and all those things are really important issues. As I said, we started off, we inherited a program which was very much about big companies working with universities, and this is how it's changed over the last few years. You can see the universities get about 80–90%. We don't set out to fund universities. The reason universities get our money is because the companies they work with see the value of doing that, and that's really important. Universities actually contribute an awful lot to this area. The large companies, as you see, have gone down, but what's important is the rise of the small and micro companies. We've got many more companies starting out. The worry for us is the medium-sized companies, because you can't go from being small to being big without passing through medium, and we don't see a lot of them in our programs, and that's really important, because getting them to grow is a really good way of getting overall economic growth. So we've been going for about 6 years. This is what we've learned. As I said, £440 million is not enough money to do this properly. We're getting more money, but over time, this is a long-term program that's been signed up by all three parties. We have to balance out the need to fund risky projects with the need to look after what is effectively your money. So apologies if sometimes the questions we ask sound a bit bureaucratic, but they are very, very necessary. There's no point in helping companies in little bits. You have to take them all the way through to commercial reality, else it's all been in vain. So we have to take them on that journey. Assessment is a difficult thing to do. By far the easiest projects to fund are the ones that are a good idea that's well expressed concisely and clearly. We don't see many of those. People always get confused. They do cut and paste. There's all sorts of problems with our process, but it's getting better. And the feedback needs to be better. Basically, if we're not telling people why they didn't succeed, then we're not helping them on that developmental journey. And then, not everybody knows who the Technology Strategy Board is, and this week, of course, the world has been enormously confused by the launch of the new TSB, which has even worse branding than we do. And their site went down as well, so that's okay. But you know, we need to actually get more companies to engage with this, because if you don't come to us, we can't help you. So, in summary, we were set up to drive economic growth. We've developed a bunch of tools which we think address the problems companies have. We're moving to do more with small companies, and we're also actually providing more coherent response. The one thing we have absolutely identified over the last 5.5 years is that you have to be able to talk to us. So all of us end our presentations with a whole bunch of contact details. Please get in contact with me. I'm here until 2 o'clock, but thank you very much for your attention.